Hello, everybody. My name is David, and I'm an actor from Chicago. And today I would like to talk to you about what we call the heartbeat of a scene or a story. We'll get into great detail about beats and understanding what those procedures and all of the functionality of beats and analysis in a story mean as we progress along. But for the most part, right now, today, I just want to describe and explain the basic structure of a story, especially for adventure telling purposes in tabletop role playing games, for example, and how those beats, right, structure a cinematically experience immersion of disbelief. But we'll get into that slowly. We'll progress there. First, we understand and need to understand the lifeline of a story. So today, I'm only going to be explaining what the lifeline of a story is and what it looks like. I'm going to explain some general terminology that we're going to be using continuing further on. So the first things, we will talk about how the parameters that we will be looking at. Much like when you go into the doctor and they take your pulse, right? There's a systolic and a diastolic pressure, right? Your blood pressure, right? It goes in between up and down, right? And there's parameters that they use to determine whether or not you're kind of alive, or you need some help, or everything's going good. Come check in, right? And we're going to look at a story as a similar situation. It either has an upbeat, that's this line here, right? An upbeat, which is hopeful, or a downbeat, which is down here, right? Which is fear. And in between those beats is the timeline of a story. Timeline of a story has emotional arcs, which, if manipulated correctly, right, and appropriately, can engage the audience into a suspended sense of disbelief in which they are engaged in the story at the moment. And as they get engaged in the story at the moment, some magic happens. Among other things, the entire audience is on the same page. It's a beautiful thing. There's a whole set of rules and procedures that they teach you in Hollywood and in other screenwriting books and in theater classes and acting classes that we can get into great detail about, but to be honest, they really don't matter. They don't. I'm going to explain them all to you in this series of videos. So again, let us review the main important structure or anatomy, right, that we'll be looking at in terms of the story. A story has 2 points. It has a high point and it has a low point. Hope, fear, right? These are the ranges of emotion in which we're going to go into. Hope is the dynamic range of emotion in which we hope that the protagonist will make it towards their goal, the end goal of the story, on which the continuum of the heartbeat of the story exists. Usually, our protagonist is presented with some challenge or some call to action in which they need to take part on some epic quest or some other sort of task which has potential for collateral damage. If it didn't, there'd be no heroic journey for our main character, and we wouldn't be very interested in them as an individual or a story, right? We need to be able to engage ourselves, or at least see ourselves in some fashion, into the main character of the story, the face of the story that we're going to project ourselves into needs to be able to engage us in some level of identity. As an example, if I was telling a story about the Wild Wild West, unless I had a very good reason for it that made sense within the context of the parameters of the story, I would never expect to see lightsabers. But that's another lesson for another day. So let's get back to our structure of our story. We have the high point, the hope, where the protagonist is trying to get moving along towards the next plot point, beat point, story point, or moment that will move the adventure or the story along towards its climax and its inevitable end. The story and the structure of it need to make sense to us, otherwise as an audience we're lost and we're gone. Fear elements in a story, or the fear beats, the downbeats in a story, are elements that take the hero away from that goal, or throw in some sort of deterrent or obstacle which keeps them from progressing towards their goal and makes the audience fear that perhaps they might not make the grade when it comes to the challenge. For example, in that book by that guy Tolkien, there's some sort of creatures called hobbits, and the hobbits are supposed to take some sort of metallic device, I believe it's a ring, and they're supposed to drop it in this volcano, and if they don't drop it in the volcano, the world as we know it ceases to exist. It's all destroyed and taken over by evil, and we don't want evil to win because evil is bad, apparently. So there was a reason why the tiny little creatures, the hobbits, needed to leave their home and the comfort of their home and trek all the way across the wastelands and the dangerous trials and tribulations of the story that was The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and Return of the King, or The Fellowship of... I don't know, there was books. I didn't read them. But I tried, and I got really bored. But that's another story also for another day. The bottom line is a lot of people understand that story because it's very common within the fantasy role-playing storytelling genre, and most people are familiar with it as a literatural work too. So it'll be a good example for us going forward, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. We're going to talk about one scene specifically in The Hobbit that I recall correctly, I hope, where the Hobbit is minding his own business in his home in the Shire. So he's sitting there and he's eating his little crumpets and teas and cakes, and I don't know, he's baking things. He's a happy little Hobbit. He's ecstatic, really. Nobody came around and messed his apartment up, and nobody's bothering him, and he's having, and he's going to have a little smoke in a minute and relax. But all of a sudden, heroic call to action, beat 1. Very important, right? Disrupt the serenity of the scene. Beat 1, call to action. Ooh, now we were just enjoying ourselves as a hobbit, relaxing and having a pipe, and we're all going to, and now, as the reader or the audience, I've been shocked out of my composure as a hobbit, relaxing, smoking a pipe, and eating some tarts. And I'm shocked by it by another beat moment called a knock at the door, and a bunch of other critter things, dwarves and humans and I don't know what, and a wizard with a big hat, and he's coming in, and they're all coming into my hovel. I don't know why, and they're telling me I got to go on a grand adventure. There's a lot to break down there, eh? So we've taken, if we beat the beats down, we've taken our hero, which is the main protagonist, which is going to be, I think his name was Bilbo Baggins. Mistaken. Bilbo is going to first off be disrupted and get his initial call to an adventure. And his hope is the scene anyway, that all the people calling him to adventure get the hell out of his house. But it's not going to happen the way he thinks it does, because there's other players involved in the scene, other characters. That's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of his story. And the other characters are going to engage our hero, and they're going to tell our hero, hey, there's a bigger reason you need to go adventuring with us, and there's a reason why we picked you. This is going to give our hero, right, his external motivation. His external motivation, right, we're going to call a procedural plot point, or procedure. Anyway, I'll get back to the rest of it in a minute, but let's start with that.